So I came to America initially to write a book about my experience escaping from North Korea, and as I said, try to really tell the people what's happening in the darkness. And it's literally the darkest place in the world right now, and nobody really, a lot of people have a clue what's happening. And I began in this dream idea as an activist, if I tell enough people, if I let the world know what's happening, we can do something to help these people. I mean, we have resources to rescue little puppies. Why can't we not help these people? And then during my activist journey, I was keep facing difficulty where people saying, okay, I care what's happening, but just I cannot do anything about it. And I was like, why? And I was starting making YouTube videos, try to, show the reality how you can order North Korean girl as a sex slave online in Chinese, like Baidu's website right now. And then Google just demonetized any video that I make on this subject.
Oh, wow.
So I was reaching out to Google like, hey, I saw that you guys were standing up for Me Too of women who are raped in corporate America. I mean, this is literally women are raped in the communist countries like North Korea and China. And like, do you not believe in women's rights or something? And they just said vaguely, oh, we just, it does not meet with our guidelines, whatever the guideline they have. And then my first book became an international bestseller. So there were people trying to make a movie about my first book. And then the producer was making it when they got me the script, and I was reading the script. And apparently when I entered China, that was my promised land. China gave me security, they protect me, they gave me identity, they were amazing country. So I called the producer what are you talking about? This is so far from the truth. This is this is not what something I want to talk about. And he said, this is the only way right now in this climate that we can make a movie about North Korean story in Hollywood.
Oh,
Because
wow.
every studio get funding from Hollywood. I mean, from China,
From
right?
China,
Hollywood.
yeah.
So they cannot never make a movie that makes China upset. And that's why I met Hillary Clinton. I've been at the State Department. I've been at the United Nations. I've been speaking at TED. I've been speaking at BBC and everywhere. As soon as I bring the China piece, they drop it. Michelle Obama has no problem standing up for girls who were captured by Boko Haram, ISIS. But nobody in the West want to stand up for girls who were captured and raped by Chinese Communist Party because of the business interest. And then that led me to my second activism right now. That was related to my book, the new book that I just recently wrote. I had luck or unfortunate circumstance. I had the opportunity to go to study in American University in New York City, and I got my 4 years BA there, and I appalled because the materials that I learned at North Korean classroom was the exact same material were being taught at Ivy League school in American university.
What do you mean by that?
So it's so interesting. In North Korea, as I said, teachers teaching us all the problems we have in the world. It's because of the white man, because of Western bastards and capitalism. At Columbia University, exactly because all the problems we have is because of the white man and capitalism and the current system. There's a meme that Kim Jong-un came to Columbia, and at the classroom he learned how he got the ideas how to brainwash North Korean people, And I think they're copying from each other. It's just amazing how the materials that the same ideas being taught in the North Korean classroom and American classroom is identical. And the mass brainwashing is happening in America, and I don't think people know what's going on.
So is that primarily what the basis of your new book is about? Is that the primary warning of the book?
So I try to bring the parallel between North Korean experience and American experience. So for examples, people really don't know how similar what's happening. So even about the white privilege, right, or white guilt, the biggest injustice that I've seen was, I mean, two of them is that people get punished for their birthplace and people get punished for the something that they didn't do. And in North Korea, as I said, we were divided into 51 different classes. And that class division based on upon what your ancestors did. Mm-hmm. So if my great-great-grandfather was a landowner or a capitalist or educated professor or a trader, my caste is going lower because my blood is tainted. And because of my great-grandfather apparently owned a tiny land in front of his house on a little garden, he marked as a landowner. That's why his offsprings are being punished for his crime. And in America, because some people, not all whites, most of them are also immigrants, right? Like even people coming from Russia, they never owned a slave. But because they're white, they say your ancestors owned the slave. Therefore, now you are guilty. You should feel guilty, and your blood is tainted. Mm-hmm. And this is the exact same ideology and tactic they use to divide people. What it does is division between people. Mm-hmm. And what North Korean regime did so successfully was dividing people and planting distrust between people. Imagine if we do not trust each other, then even if a government becomes enemy, we don't have ally to fight back. And now at Columbia classrooms, exact same thing. They say, if you say or do anything you do make somebody feel emotionally uncomfortable, you can get kicked out of the university. Mm-hmm. It's unlike North Korea, you're not gonna get executed. But if you go against the political correctness, they assassinate your character. Like as soon as you disagree with the mainstream ideology in America now, they say you're a bigot, you're a Nazi, you're the racist, you're right wing, and they take your job away, your livelihood away, and they take your dignity away, and they kill your character.
Yes.
And of course, the retaliation is never gonna be that close right now. But this is the beginning phase. And a lot of times when I came to America, they were asking me, like, our North Koreans are so dumb or something. Why there is no revolution? Why don't they rise up? And I was thinking, like, how many of us in America right now are like censoring ourselves, censoring our speech to not get canceled? And especially during the pandemic era where we could not talk about like, oh, the children are safe from pandemic. They should not put on a mask on their face. Like I have a 5 years old now, but he was like 2 years old during the pandemic. He goes daycare. They put a mask until here, 8 hours a day in the daycare. Great. And the injustice of that is they open the nightclubs and bars and strip clubs. Adults can go and drink and smoke pot and be in a nightclub. Little kids cannot run around for 8 hours a day in this like mass prison. Mm-hmm. And if you say that on Twitter, and now Twitter is a bit different, but Facebook, Instagram, any other social media, YouTube, you get demonetized, you get strike warnings. And that's when I was like, we do not have a freedom of speech anymore. Like it's taking away from us every single day. Mm-hmm. And people don't know that it begins like that gradual steps. We're never gonna be one day become like North Korea. But certainly the path is there because our children at school learning exact same things that North Korean children are learning at their school. And that cannot be a great thing. Look at what their future is looking like right now.
Wow. That's powerful right there. That's powerful. So essentially, as I understand this, it's the same tactics at play. So obviously it's not the same degree of severity or physical danger or anything like that, but it's the same collectivist way of thinking. It's the same divide and conquer, divide and rule, keep people, create this chill effect through censorship so that people start to police their own words and eventually police their own thoughts. And I mean, it's so interesting even as you say it, because as you're talking, do you know what I was just thinking as you're talking? I was like, oh, is she going to say anything that's going to, risk this video on YouTube getting demonetized, right? Because
Exactly.
I've had podcasts demonetized. I've had podcasts, I've had certain episodes that are not on YouTube because we in relation to the scamdemic, certain things were mentioned that are not allowed, and so it's not, obviously it's not a one-to-one equivalent. Like, we're talking totally different levels of censorship and oppression and whatever, but I think the idea is it's the same idea and way of thinking that has played out so many times in history. When you start to categorize people in different classes and you ascribe collective guilt or collective blame onto people, when you want to start punishing people for other people's wrongdoing or other people's sins, or punish them simply for their immutable characteristics. It's so interesting because it's a complete inversion of what actually makes the Western world, the modern Western world, so free and have so much liberty and so much potential for greatness. It was actually moving away from this heavily collectivist thinking and just moving more towards liberty and towards the individual and individual rights and freedom of speech and freedom of association and all those things. And there's this strange inversion which has been happening, really accelerated in the past decade, actually. Because, 15, 20 years ago, some of the conversations we're now having, people weren't thinking about these things or worrying about them. But there are many people now, funnily enough, many who even call themselves liberal, who are who've just moved very far away from liberalism. They've kind of come full circle to where they start advocating for censorship and they want to restrict freedom of speech. And, again, during the pandemic situation, they wanted to force masks on people. They wanted to force needles into people's arms. They wanted to create discrimination and segregation and policies and laws which would separate people depending on whether or not they took a needle to the arm, all of that stuff. And as someone who, I grew up primarily in the Middle East. I grew up in Saudi Arabia, but I was born in England, went to an American school in Saudi Arabia for a while. Then I went back to school in England. My family's from Nigeria. So I've been exposed to all these different countries and cultures. And as someone who appreciates countries like the UK and like the USA and for certain things, it was very alarming. It's been very alarming for me to see people afraid to voice what they think, or people afraid to say, I'm not even talking about views that are fringe or extreme or anything. People should be allowed to voice fringe views as well. But just very sort of, I don't know, people afraid to say that, terrified to say that they voted for Trump, terrified to say that they voted for Brexit, terrified to say that a woman doesn't have a penis, terrified to say that men shouldn't compete in women, whatever it is, very obvious things. It's like, people are feeling forced to say that 2 + 2 = 5 when they know that it doesn't. And this must hit even harder for you given your background, but I think it's something that a lot of people are concerned about. And I think someone with your background ringing that alarm bell is very salient. I think it's very powerful.
Yeah, so what you just thought about, like, how at Columbia they say the math is a white man's, the gender is a construct made by white men to control people, right? And the same thing is math is racist, is made by white men to control people. And literally reminded of my North Korean lecture. And one of my first times when I was going to school, my teacher were telling me one day, what is 1 + 1? And I was not a good student, but this I knew. I was 2. And my teacher would tell me, wrong. Why am I wrong? And it's you add 1 drop of water and add another drop of water. What does that become? Becomes a bigger one. It does not become 2. That's how my dear little Kim Jong-il as a child proved that math was made by white men. It was not logical. And this exact same nonsensical thing were being taught at the Ivy League school at Columbia by a most educated professor can imagine. How math is made up by the white men to control people. And I'm like, do you know? So in some ways, I think they don't even know themselves. The same ideology drove North Korea to this is same driving themselves even. They don't understand how similar they are, how ridiculous themselves are right now.
Yeah. Well, I think the problem here is twofold, and this is something I really noticed over the last few years when all these various nations and states and cities became very, very tyrannical with their whole COVID response. I think the reason why a lot of people in the West can easily slip into that is because of sort of two fallacies. I think number one, people always think this can't happen here. You hear about China, you hear about North Korea, you hear about certain things that have happened in the Middle East or certain parts of Africa or whatever, and people think that can't happen here. Like that can't happen here. Where this is America, this is the UK, this is France, this is Germany, whatever it is, that can't happen here. And then I think number two is people always think it can't go that far, right?
Yeah.
So even right now, we know how far it can go because you come from a country where it's gone that far and where it's been that far for many decades at this point. But people also think it won't go that far. So if you're on stage 2, then people don't think that stage 5 is even possible. It seems it's too far. Like, no, maybe it'll get to stage 3, but it won't get to stage 7. And then suddenly you're in stage 6 and it's like, oh no, okay, well, we can't get to stage 10. So I think that type of lack of vigilance is how people can fall into these things. And they don't really realize when it's happening until it's never too late to do something about, but the longer you leave it, the harder it becomes to push back. If you've gotten so used to censoring yourself all the time, you've gotten so used to hiding your identity or not speaking up when you see something, then once you program yourself to do that, then it becomes hard to generate the courage when you actually need it. I consider both cowardice and courage habits, right? They're not just things they're things you practice every single day, right? Every single day that you're out there, you're speaking online, offline, you're doing all you do, you're cultivating that courage habit. I imagine for you, courage isn't even something that you need to psych yourself up for, right? It's just, it's your default setting, right? Your default setting is to speak out and to speak up and say what you think is right and call attention to the things that you think need attention called to. For someone who has spent the last 10 years avoiding that and not doing it, then when they want to do it, they actually find oftentimes that they really struggle to because they haven't practiced. They got so used to always taking the path to avoid the conflict, the path to, path of least resistance, that actually when it comes time to speak up, they're even more scared now. And they think, oh, no, I can't do it. And then they want to kind of hide and leave other people to do it. And I think this is what's leading to a lot of the sort of modern current madness. Is I don't think it's so much that most people are brainwashed or most people don't know what's going on or whatever. I just think that people are afraid. There's this chill, and I'm starting to see the chill thawing. I think that the pendulum is starting to swing back. I'm starting to see more and more people compared to, say, 2017 or 2018. I'm seeing more people who are willing to stick their head up and speak out about certain issues. And I think that's good. And I think that someone like yourself, massive respect to you, because I think it's not just important for yourself and the things you're drawing attention to. I think it's important because it sets an example for other people. Other people can look at your courage and bravery and see how you're moving, and it encourages them to go, oh, okay, wow, there's this young woman out there who went through all this and is still out there and speaking and okay, I can do a little bit more, surely, right?